Have you had an encounter with the king or the queen of the forest, and you'd like to hear it narrated on this channel? If so, send me an email with all the details. You can email me at contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Welcome to Buckeye Bigfoot, where we share Bigfoot encounters from around the globe. Now, tonight our journey into Sasquatch Valley will take us on a journey to visit once again with Darlene from Minnesota, as she tells us how she met her Bigfoot family once again. If you missed Darlene's first story, I'll put a link to it in the video description. So if you haven't already, grab your snackage and get your drink ready, and then saddle up. The horses are waiting. And somewhere down the trail into Sasquatch Valley, the hairy forest giants are waiting for us too. Let's go. Hello, Bigfoot friends. I'm back with an update on my saga of friendly Bigfoot summers. I sit here watching the chickadees making a nest in the birdhouse beyond my window here in southern Minnesota. The busy squirrels gather the nuts that they left from holes in the ground last fall. They look at me through the window because they know I'm watching them. During the summer months, they dig in my raised beds and accidentally kill my flowers. I'm not at the cabin up north right now, but spring is coming. Unfortunately, northern Minnesota warms up later in the spring than the Twin Cities, so I wait a bit to go up there. There may still be snow on the ground there, and very muddy too, and the nights could still be chilly. When I get there, I would go to Park Rapids to find a neighbor with his plow to pick up and smooth out my driveway. When I was able to reach the cabin, I began readying it for the summer. I had to turn on the water and clean out any mess that the mice had left behind. That is the reality of owning a cabin in the woods. After unpacking and filling the fridge and cupboards with food, I rested after the long drive. I would go and sit in my comfy living room by the potbelly stove, which warms the cabin in the cool spring evenings. The next few days, I received a few visits from people who realized I was now back. That neighborhood worries about the people and their property. When school is out for the summer, sometimes my family will run up for a few days. Soon the temperature is warm enough to be able to plant my little garden. I planted cabbage, broccoli, potatoes, peppers, and tomatoes. If I had planted lettuce, the rabbits would soon be in through my fence for breakfast in no time. When the meadow was dry enough so that I could go for a walk, I put on my boots and ventured toward the woods. I was anxious to see how the forest critters had done over the winter. Maybe the Bigfoot family was still there. Maybe Mama Bear had another family. And maybe the Big Feet family would have a new family too. The muddy paths were a little difficult to walk on, but I managed. Soon my boots would be heavy and covered with sticky mud. I did see tracks in the paths and in the little patches of snow that were still showing amongst the weeds and bushes. The squirrels, raccoons, and other wildlife had apparently emerged from their hideout, looking for fresh growth to fill their little tummies and maybe to feed their new babies. I sometimes spotted a tiny new fawn hiding in the logs. The birds would be chirping and flitting from branch to branch. The smell in the woods indicated new beginnings. At the beginning, I did not smell the really bad smell from last year. About a week later, I left my cabin to go to town for a few things. I purchased a bird feeder, a birdhouse, and a hummingbird feeder, and some flowers to plant. When I returned from town that day, there was a pile of branches and pine cones on my porch. After thinking about it, I wondered if the pile on the porch was from Bigfoot and not squirrels. I noticed there were a few stones in the pile. Squirrels wouldn't do that. I was excited to think that maybe my Bigfoot friends were telling me they knew where I lived and hoped that I was back in their area. One night I heard what I recognized as Mama Bear doing her scratching on the nearby tree. I peeked out my window, and there under the moonlight I could see her. At first, I couldn't see a cub, but I looked up in the tree, and there were 2 black cubs scurrying through the branches. She made a muffling sound as if to tell them they could come down now. Until Mama headed toward the woods, they played on the ground, as if in no hurry to leave the area. It was finally time for me to go see the Bigfoot family. I had hoped that they would show themselves to me, since they maybe knew I was there, but they hadn't. I took a handful of walnuts and a couple oranges to the area by the lake. I listened carefully for grunts or branch breaks. Then I sat down on a log nearby and waited. If they were around, maybe they would show themselves. It was quiet except for the birds in the distance. I had a feeling like I was being watched. I started smelling the identifying odor as Bigfoot. I turned slowly, and behind me saw what I figured was Papa Bigfoot, staring quietly at me from behind a tree. As I watched him, I felt as though he was saying hello, and he had sort of a smile on his big, crazy face. I made a motion to come to me. At first he didn't, but he didn't leave either. I started playing with the orange in my hand, but I ignored him. There was another log in the distance away from me. He finally sat down on that and watched what I was doing. Maybe he hadn't seen an orange before. I tore a little rind from it and threw it in his direction. The aroma from the juice filled the air. He picked it up and he smelled it. Then he ate it, but he made a face like it was terrible. But after peeling the rest of the orange, I ate a piece, and to myself out loud I said, "Oh, how good it was." He was still curious, and he moved along the log until he was just a few feet away from me. Even though I was a little unsure about touching him, I reached out, and I gave him a couple pieces of the orange, which he ate. I laughed because there was juice dripping down his big hairy chin. A look of surprise in his eyes made me think that he liked it, and then he reached for another one. We finished that orange and ate the other one too. Then I reached into my pocket and I took out the nuts. He seemed to be wondering what else I was keeping in my pocket. He kept glancing back to the woods where he had come from. Soon I saw a movement, and the 6-foot Mama Bigfoot slowly came out to watch. I put the nuts on the ground. Papa reached for them and then grunted to her that she should come and get some. She also turned toward the woods where I soon spied more heads. A medium-sized Bigfoot came out behind her. Then slowly a tiny Bigfoot that was only about 3 feet tall, and that followed them. They had a new baby, too. The teenage Bigfoot, who had grown to about 5 feet now, may have been the one who played throw the rock with me last year, and it didn't seem too scared of me to go grab a nut and bring it to Mama and little sister or brother. The family squatted on the ground and seemed to be chatting about everything. They were probably waiting for me to bring out more surprise treats for them. I showed my empty hands and flat pockets to prove to them that was all that I had. They again chatted amongst themselves in their language and grunted, and then they all got up and disappeared into the woods again. I thought we had established a relationship beyond just the food and maybe a little bit of trust between 2 of God's creatures. I went home, happily hoping that this would be a great summer and that I would learn about a new animal I didn't know before. Afterwards, I had hoped that they would come to my yard, but they didn't. But sometimes I heard movement in the trees. Mama Bear was not as ready to be in my sight. She was very protective of her privacy, and that was okay. I enjoyed my growing garden with the birds, the bees, and the hummingbirds that flitted into my yard. The many flowers I'd planted drew the honeybees and the hummingbirds. If I moved carefully, they didn't pay much attention to me and went on about their business. I wasn't sure how to attract the Bigfoot family next. What could I do to get their attention? I decided to go fishing. I caught a walleye and a couple of good-sized crappies. I collected some sticks and made a circle of stones. Then, with my fire starter, I managed to start a campfire. I also brought a pan to put the fish in after I cleaned them. The gulls watched as I threw them the innards of the fish, and delightedly they dove into the water to retrieve them. I heated the pan, then added the butter that I had in my bag. I fried the fish, which smoked and smelled great as they cooked. When they were done, I ate them, and I had some toast that I heated in the coals below. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring a hot pad, so I almost burned my fingers. Then I turned around, and Papa Bigfoot was looking at me. He stood at a distance as if afraid of the fire. He seemed to think a minute. Then he jumped into the lake with a big splash. After a couple of minutes, he emerged from the water, dripping with weedy water and carrying a fish in each of his hands. He dropped the fish near me. Did he want me to cook them? The family probably ate them whole and raw. So I cleaned them with my knife, called the gulls, and prepared the pan for the fire again. Papa Bigfoot attempted to chase after the gulls, but I gestured to him. That was their meal. He then stood still. Then when the fish were done, I laid them on a large rock and waited for him to take them. He touched them, then he gestured to the woods. Baby Bigfoot came to him and shared the other fish. Maybe Papa Bigfoot was babysitting today, since no one else showed up. I gathered up my belongings, put water on the coals, and got ready to go home. Papa Bigfoot had to stop Baby Bigfoot from going to the coals in curiosity. The next morning, I found 2 whole crappies wrapped in wild rice reeds lying on my porch. Later, I fried them on my potbelly stovetop with a side of prepared wild rice that I had received from the natives who stopped by sometimes on their way to somewhere else. Now, they might ask to trade for a piece of jewelry because they had seen that I make and display them in my cabin. Wild rice beds are often in the weedy areas in nearby lakes near the reservation. They used their canoes to find them, and then they would hit the reeds with a stick to knock the rice into their canoes. Then they usually share that rice with friends and family. Soon the leaves began to turn and fall from the willows and oak trees, and the sap from the pine trees was strong in the air as the wind came down in bursts. Fall was upon us. I began to think of returning to my southern home for the winter. There would be leaves to rake, flower beds to clear, and I knew I was missing my family. I was glad the summer had been eventful. I had seen the big feet often and exchanged with some new attempts to communicate. Next year, if I'm well, I plan to sit near them and try to make them understand the idea of names for each of us. I wonder if I could convince my granddaughter to join me then, since my family still own the property. Goodbye for now, Darlene. Darlene, thank you so much for that. I do hope that if you return next year as you plan, that you write and let us know about any moments you have with that Big Feet family. And of course, if you have any others from the past that you still want to share with us, well, you know we want to hear them. And for those of you listening, if you missed Darlene's first story or you just want to revisit it, well, I'll put the link to that video in the video description below. Now listen, everyone, I've only got a couple things to say. First, if you heard birds chirping and cars driving, well, it's gorgeous here, and I have to have the windows open. So I do not have a dedicated booth that's completely soundproof. So if you hear life out here in Southwest Ohio, well, that's the windows open. Anyway, I also want to take a small second to mention that many of you have let me know, both in the comments, on the videos, and in emails, that you are not getting notifications for my videos. Apparently, somewhere along the way this spring, I have angered the YouTube algorithm gods in a fierce and violent way. I have no idea what I've done. But my videos are not being suggested in browse features. and a large portion of my subscribers are not getting notified about new videos as they once did. I verified this by checking with several family and friends who found that they were not getting notifications when I dropped a video. So it turned out their notifications were no longer set to all and had been moved to none. Now, they didn't do that. So if you look up here on the screen, of course, I'm showing one of my favorite channels, Alone in Remote Alaska. Anyway, this shows you when you subscribe, you have to hit that bell that says all. Otherwise, you're not going to get any. So make sure it's still there. I mean, if you've done that, I really terribly appreciate it. And the thing is, I'm still getting less views right now, and this is going to blow your mind. I'm getting less views right now with 82,000 subscribers than I did the second month that I created this channel. And I had less than 5,000 subscribers then, but I got more daily views than I'm getting now. So something's really going on with the algorithm. So please, if you're listening to this, please check that you've got your subscribe bell hit to all. I also want to say I greatly appreciate your support and the fact that so many of you are returning and you're listening to older viewers again and again. Yes, I can see that on analytics. I really appreciate that. That really does help the channel. Plus a simple thumbs up for a like and a comment goes a long way as well. Again, so many of you are so loyal. I really do appreciate you. All right, well, that's enough nattering on for tonight. Thank you again for staying with me on this journey. And until we meet up again, which you know won't be too far off, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.